Sahel, revolutionary leaders in countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have pushed foreign troops out in the name of African sovereignty, tearing up old military deals with France and the United States. Yet, on the Horn of Africa, two rival governments sharing the same coastline are quietly moving in the opposite direction, rolling out the red carpet for Washington on some of the most strategic shores on the planet. While headlines say Africa is closing its doors to foreign bases, these neighbors are offering up the same stretch of coastline, the same ports, and the same airfields to the very power others are pushing away. Along sea lanes already shaken by Red Sea attacks and great power rivalry, places like Berbera and Bosaso now sit at the crossroads of global shipping, energy flows, and military logistics in a way most people still underestimate. In this episode, the focus is on how an internationally reorganized government in the capital and a breakaway authority up north both moved, almost in parallel, to sell access to runways and deep water ports in exchange for protection, training, and political leverage. One side frames US presence as protection against insurgents and hostile neighbors. The other openly trades ports and minerals for recognition and regime insurance. In this episode, we're going to dive deep into how Africa went from saying no more bases to signing new invitations, how these two rivals turned their coastline into a bargaining chip, and why what happens on this shore could redraw the continent's security map for years to come. In 2022 and 2023, the revolutionary government in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger terminated defense agreements with France and ordered French troops to withdraw, citing failures in counterinsurgency efforts and growing frustrations with foreign interference. Mali ended its 2014 defense accord, and French Operation Barkhane forces completed their departure by August 2022. Burkina Faso followed, ending France's military presence in February 2023. Niger also revoked its 2012 military cooperation agreement and ordered French troops out by December 2023. Massive demonstrations in these countries, particularly in Niger's capital, Niamey, turned French facilities into symbols of perceived neo-colonial controls for many protesters, not guarantees of protection. Alongside this, the United States operated a network of sites across Africa, including Airbase 101 in Niamey and Airbase 201 near Agadez, a $110 million drone facility which hosted around 1,000 to 1,100 US personnel and served as hubs for surveillance and counterterrorism missions over the Sahel. Official statements framed these locations as tools against armed groups and threats to trade routes, but a range of Pan-African commentators and activists criticized them as evidence of a lasting external footprint that has survived the end of the Cold War. In March 2024, Niger's revolutionary government suspended its defense agreement with Washington, declared the US military presence unconstitutional, and demanded withdrawal, leading US African Command to halt operations and begin a negotiated pullout completed by 5th of August 2024. By 2024, with the alliance of Sahel states consolidating ties and distancing itself from Western forces, analysts widely describe this trend as a turning point in how parts of Africa dealt with foreign basing. The Sahel was telling the world, your bases are no longer welcome here. Against this backdrop of expulsions and refusals, the emergence of new offers of access to US forces on another stretch of African coastline raised sharp questions about what was really changing and what was not. While Sahel capitals were redefining their security relationships, two neighboring authorities on the Horn of Africa were moving in a different direction. They share a long shoreline facing the Gulf of Eden and the Red Sea route, an area that has become even more sensitive since Houthi attacks on shipping from November 2023 onward forced many vessels to reroute and highlighted the strategic value of nearby ports and airfields. On land, these actors have historically competed over political authority, control of trade corridors, and access to coastal infrastructure that links East Africa to global markets. On one side is the internationally recognized federal government based in Mogadishu. The other consists of northern administrations, including the self-declared Republic of Somaliland and the Puntland region, which claim significant autonomy and contest aspects of Somali's territorial and constitutional order. In public forums, all sides have frequently invoked sovereignty and the need for African-led solutions, while participating in broader debates about dependency on external security guarantors. Yet, as piracy concerns, militant threats and regional rivalries intensified, each began exploring closer security ties with Washington that went well beyond traditional training and support. Publicly available reporting shows that federal authorities in Mogadishu presenting cooperation with the United States as part of counterterrorism and state-building efforts, while northern leaders have promoted investment in ports and infrastructure as steps towards economic growth and political recognition. Behind these narratives, offers of access to coastline facilities created overlapping channels of engagement with US officials, with both actors looking to Washington at roughly the same time. A new layer was added to their rivalry. Competition to position their stretch of coastline as the more valuable partner in a contested security environment. Two rivals, one coastline, and both raising to offer it to the same outside power. Documents reported by Reuters in March 2025 indicate that Somalia's president sent a letter to the US president offering the United States exclusive management of specific air bases and ports, including Balidogle Air Base near Mogadishu and the ports and air facilities at Berbera and Bosaso. The letter, which was dated 16th March and cited by regional diplomats, framed these locations as strategic assets that could underpin a deeper US role in the Horn of Africa, particularly in countering militant groups and securing maritime routes. From Washington's perspective, analysts noted that this proposal appeared at a moment when the US was reassuring its posture after losing access to key drone hubs in Niger and facing uncertainty over other inland facilities. What the Sahel took away, the Horn was offering to give back. Balidogle has already been used as a site for US training of Somali forces, while Berbera and Bosaso sit along shipping lanes linking the Red Sea, Gulf of Eden, and Indian Ocean routes that carry substantial volumes of global commerce. A cluster of ports and runways on this coastline could, in principle, support maritime surveillance, rapid response operations, and broader regional missions fitting into an existing US pattern of combining larger hubs with smaller, flexible sites. For Somalia's federal leadership, the offer came amidst ongoing security challenges from Al-Shabaab and political pressure within the federal system, making external backing an important element of regime and state security. Official language emphasized stability and counterterrorism, but critics inside and outside Somalia argue that expanding foreign management of critical infrastructure risked deepening dependency and heightening tensions with regional authorities who contest control over some of these locations, particularly Berbera and Somaliland. As federal officials pursued closer ties with Washington, northern rivals watched closely, aware that same facilities were central to their own strategic calculations. Assessments by regional security analysts and think tanks describe how Somaliland and Puntland have also sought to leverage their coastal positions, ports, and mineral resources in negotiations with outside powers, including the United States, Somaliland, which declared independence in 1991, but remains unrecognized by any UN member states. And this has promoted Berbera as a potential base and logistics hubs, presenting it in itself a stable partner in a volatile region and highlighting existing foreign investment in the port and associated facilities, including the UAE-linked DP Wet Management of Berbera Port under a 30-year concession signed in 2016. Puntland, centered on Bosaso, has worked closely with external actors on counter-piracy and counter-terrorism, with Bosaso Port and nearby air infrastructure playing a role in maritime security and operations against armed groups. According to the African Security Analysis Report and other open sources assessments, Somaliland has offered access to a base in Berbera and mineral opportunities, seeking security guarantees and stronger political ties, while Puntland's integration into US counterterrorism efforts has underscored the operational value of Bosaso. These moves unfolded as Mogadishu's federal government advanced its own proposals, creating overlapping channels of engagement in which each authority emphasized that it could provide more reliable or strategically placed facilities. For Washington, analysts note that this competition increases options by presenting multiple coastal sites within a relatively compact area, each with different political trade-offs. For Somaliland and Puntland, cutting US interest is part of a broader effort to secure external backing, whether in form of recognition debates, development funding, or security assistance. Critics within Somali political circles warn that parallel deals and rival offers risk deepening internal fractures and complicating efforts to manage federal-regional relations. Supporters counter that. In the absence of a settled political settlement, external partnerships are one of the few levers available to maintain security and attract investments. But when two authorities from the same country are competing to offer the same ports to the same foreign power, the question is no longer just about security. It is about who controls the state itself. US Africa Command has long relied on a mix of large installations, such as Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti, which hosts approximately 4,000 US personnel and serves as the only permanent US military base on the African continent, and a network of smaller lily-pad sites that can host aircrafts, special forces, and surveillance missions with limited government and permanent infrastructure. The first halt of operations in Niger in March 2024, followed by a negotiated withdrawal from Airbase 101 in Niamey and Airbase 201 near Agadez, completed by August 2024, removed two of Washington's most important inland platforms for monitoring the Sahel. This prompted renewed attention to coastal locations that could cover both maritime routes and parts of the interior. The Horn of Africa stands out in this calculus because it sits between the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and the wider Indian Ocean, an area whose importance was underscored when Houthi attacks from November 2023 onward disrupted shipping, slashed traffic through the Bab el Mandeb Strait and Suez Canal, and forced many vessels to reroute around the Cape of Good Hope, adding roughly 10 to 14 days and significant fuel costs to journeys between Asia and Europe. Ports and airfields or near Somalia, Somaliland, and Puntland are already embedded in a crowded security landscape that includes Turkish facilities in Mogadishu, Emirati-linked operations in Berbera and Bosaso, and multiple foreign bases in Djibouti. In this environment, sites along the Somali coastline are often discussed by analysts as potential nodes in a wider grid that would allow US forces to monitor shipping, support counter-piracy and counter-terrorism, and project power toward both East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. Officially, U.S. documents and statements stress counter-terrorism and freedom of navigation. Critics on the continent see a different pattern, one of adaptation in which the loss of some landlocked drone hubs is simply offset by a denser coastal presence rather than a genuine drawdown. The footprint does not shrink, it migrates. As federal and regional elites in and around Somalia refine proposals and negotiations over access to ports, airfields, and training partnerships with external powers, a different debate is unfolding among activists, students, labor organizers, and diaspora groups. Across West and East Africa, these networks increasingly connect new or proposed basin arrangements on the Horn to earlier confrontations in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, where mass protests and revolutionary governments pushed French forces out and challenged aspects of U.S. military cooperation. For these critics, new offers of access to foreign forces on African soil look like a continuation of patterns they believe the Sahel's revolutionary leaders have started to reverse. In Somalia and its northern regions, authorities have defended security cooperation with outside powers as essential for countering al-Shabaab, deterring piracy, improving coastal surveillance, and attracting investment to ports and infrastructure projects. Agreements and drafts understanding often extend beyond basin to include training, intelligence sharing, and joint operations, though many of the details remain opaque to the general public. Supporters argue that without such partnerships, already fragile institutions would face even greater pressure from armed groups and regional rivalries. However, each new foreign footprint on African bases also feeds skepticism among citizens and movements who see global powers competing over strategic corridors, ports, and resources from the Sahel to the Horn. The pattern is unmistakable. Leaders negotiate in private, while communities learn about the deals after they are signed. Analysts warn that arrangements which stabilize government in the short term can still contribute to polarization if communities feel excluded from decision-making or view external involvement as overriding national priorities. That tension between the calculations and popular demands for deeper sovereignty now shapes how many Africans interpret new basin debates, whether in inland capitals or on the coast. As discussions over runway upgrades, port expansions, and security cooperation continue in the rival Horn authorities, a broader continental argument is taking shape about what kind of external military presence, if any, Africa should accept. Some leaders portray deals with powers like the United States, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, or European states as pragmatic responses to real threats. Piracy, jihadist insurgencies, and cross-border smuggling that local forces struggle to manage alone. For many activists and ordinary citizens, these same arrangements look like a new round of dependency that many lock critical infrastructure and security policy into a long-term patterns seen from outside. From West Africa to the Horn, two broad paths are visible in current debates. One sees more government using ports and basin access as bargaining tools to secure aid, weapons, and diplomatic backing from foreign capitals. A trend evident in negotiations over facilities in Niger before the U.S. withdrawal and in offers involving sites like Berbera and Bosaso. The other is championed by revolutionary governments in the Sahel and Pan-African movements that call for regional security arrangements on African terms, reduced reliance on external troops, and stronger continental mechanisms to manage crises. What happens in Somalia's rival territories will send signals well beyond their borders. If their partnerships with outside militaries deliver stability and economic gains without deepening internal fractures, other governments may see them as a model. If the costs appear instead in heightening tensions, contested sovereignty over ports and airfields, or growing public anger, their example may serve as a warning. But either way, the underlying issue remains the same. African societies, from Sahel capitals to coastal cities and diaspora communities, are actively contesting how power, security, and autonomy should be organized on the continent. The story of these rival coastal authorities is one chapter in that larger struggle over who ultimately sets the terms of Africa's future. This is Frontline Africa. If this kind of unfiltered Africa First analysis resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think. My name is P. Solomon, and I'll see you in the next one.